Hi there, my name is Carly, and I am the creator of fearlessfemaletravels.com. I have been traveling solo for more than 20 years, and in that time I've visited more than 70 countries. I've also lived and studied overseas and run a successful travel blog for the past 5 years. Now, I'm here with the new Fearless Female Travels podcast. I want to talk about the beautiful places I've visited and help you plan your own dream trips. I'm a dedicated slow traveler and will often spend an entire week in one small town rather than try to squeeze 5 cities into a week. If you like to travel at a more leisurely pace, then you will love my stories. And if you have less time, then you'll appreciate my suggestions for the very best attractions, activities, restaurants, and accommodation in the destinations I discuss. Other things that are really important to me when I travel include supporting local businesses, getting immersed in the local culture, and challenging myself to step out of my comfort zone. I'm not an influencer, and I'm not a videographer. I'm just a really passionate solo female traveler who wants to talk to you about the best travel experiences around the world. Matera is one of the oldest cities in the world, with a history that goes back over 9,000 years. It's often included in Puglia travel guides and itineraries, and I'm guilty of that as well. But technically speaking, Matera is just across the border in the neighboring region of Basilicata. Matera is famous for its ancient cave dwellings, called sassi, which were homes carved into caves in the rocky hills. But these aren't Paleolithic homes we're talking about here. People in Matera lived in caves until well into the 1950s. Back then, Matera was so poor it was called the shame of Italy. But now it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a symbol of resilience. This renaissance has inspired the local people to take pride in their history, opening former sassi homes as house museums and converting others into luxurious restaurants, hotels, and even spas. Visiting Matera feels like stepping back into a storybook where the past and present live side by side, and it was one of my most magical experiences on my recent Puglia trip. In this second episode of the Fearless Female Travels podcast, I'm going to talk about some of the best things to do in Matera, followed by a few hotel and restaurant recommendations. I'll also talk about getting to Matera from Bari, which can be surprisingly confusing, especially on Sundays. I started my first full day in Matera with a guided walking tour of the Sassi, the cave district. As you can see from the photos over on my blog, the historical center of the city is built on a steep hill, and it's organized around a labyrinth of stairs and alleys. If you do start your visit with a guided tour, this will really help you understand what you're seeing in the cave area, and it also helps you to follow a logical route without too much uphill backtracking. The tour that I took started in the modern city center at the top of the hill. We then walked to one of the panoramic lookout points and then descended into the Sassi. Along the way, we learned about the history of the city, the construction and uses of the caves, how people lived as part of cave communities, and how the Sassi went from being homes to becoming abandoned tourist attractions. Our tour also included entrance to a cave house museum, as well as the ruins of a cave church. Overall, we were walking for just about 3 hours, and doing this first equipped me with the information I needed to understand what I would see in Matera for the rest of my visit. After your walking tour of Matera, the second thing that you're going to want to do is pick up the Matera Church Pass. This was a mistake that I made on my trip. I was thinking to myself, how many cave churches will I actually want to go inside? I'm sure that one's going to be enough. But obviously, after I didn't buy the pass, I quickly realized I wanted to go inside all of the cave churches, and by then I'd missed out on the value that I could have got if I'd bought this pass. So in summer 2024, the cost of the pass was €25, and it included entry to 3 cave churches, 1 cave house museum, 1 underground water cistern, and a few other attractions around town. This pass is definitely a good value, and I do recommend buying it. The first cave church I visited was Santa Lucia alla Malve, which is located at the bottom of the historical center near the canyon. Dating back to the 700s, this church is notable for its well-preserved frescoes from the early Middle Ages. This is quite a small church, though, so you'll only need 5 or 10 minutes to see the interior. The cave church that I enjoyed the most was called San Pietro Beresano. This is the largest cave church in Matera, and it dates back to the 1100s. There are 2 levels in this church that are open to visitors. The ground floor has several intricate altars that are carved from stone, and then beneath them, you can descend into this subterranean crypt where the corpses of priests who had passed away were left to drain of all their liquids. Historically, I should say, not recently. This was definitely one of the creepiest places I've ever visited. Another church you'll want to visit in Matera is called San Pietro Cavoso, which is different than San Pietro Berosano. So this one's not in a cave, but it's absolutely an unmissable landmark that you can see from all over Matera. This is a Baroque church that was built in the 14th century, although most of what you see inside is more recent. To the left of the entrance is one of the best panoramic lookout points in the city, and to the right, you'll find Santa Lucia alla Malve Church. So when I was in Matera in July, the temperature was almost 40 degrees Celsius all day, every day. And the dark, simplistic interior of this church was really appreciated because it was free and a very welcome respite from the heat. The third can't miss thing to do in Matera is to visit some of the city's beautiful panoramic lookout points. So the caves are situated downhill from the modern town center, which means that all around the top there are some spectacular viewpoints where you can see these stone houses and the caves that just tumble down the hill. The first lookout point that I found was called the Belvedere di Piazza Giovanni Pascoli, which is near the National Museum of Matera. From here, at the south edge of town, you can look north across the whole Sassi area, all the way to the Cathedral Tower. Another really easy-to-access panoramic viewpoint in Matera is the Belvedere Luigi Gericchio, which is also known as the Three Arches. That's a little easier for me to say. This lookout point is more central, so it's great for taking those panoramic photos that span the Sassi from north to south, or vice versa. The arches themselves are pretty contemporary, so they don't really create a gorgeous photo framing opportunity, but it's still a great place to look out. And there's some other panoramic lookout points around the historic center. Lots are marked on maps, others you'll just find as you're wandering around. If you do find another great lookout point, please leave a comment below and let me know for my next visit. Another thing that makes Matera really cool is its network of underground cisterns. And when you're in Matera, you absolutely have to visit at least one. So for centuries, the people who lived in Matera relied on this complex system of underground cisterns to provide water for their homes, families, animals, and businesses. These cisterns were all interconnected, and they were surprisingly technologically advanced. They were dug by hand, but they were designed and engineered in such a way that ensured no water would ever be wasted. As the cisterns towards the top of the hillside Sassi filled to capacity, the excess water would flow through these sloped channels downhill to fill the cisterns further below. Today, a few different cisterns are open to the public. The one I visited was called the Palombaro Lungo, which is a cavernous underground well that has been open to the public since the 1990s. When it was in use, this was Matera's largest cistern, and it could hold more than 5 million liters of water. It has ceilings that tower about 18 meters tall and metal walkways that are suspended just inches above the water. And in my opinion, this €3 admission ticket is worth it just to see the massive scale of this cistern and to understand how much water it was able to supply. The next thing that you have to do in Matera is to sample some of the city's famous bread, pane di Matera. You probably know that Italy takes its food seriously, but you might not know there are 3 different labels that can protect the origins, ingredients, and preparation of traditional foods. There's one dish in Matera that earned the designation of IGP, which translates sort of to Protected Geographical Indication in English, and this food is pane di Matera. You're not going to miss this anywhere. It's impossible to miss pane di Matera as you're strolling around town. I mean, there are loaves of this bread in the street for decorations, and almost every restaurant will serve a basket of this bread with your meal. These loaves of bread are huge, they're dark brown on the outside, and they're pale yellow on the inside. The bread is made from durum wheat semolina flour, and then it's fermented with yeast that comes from local fruits. Historically, pane di Matera was baked in communal ovens, with each loaf stamped by the family's special seal so that it could be easily identified when it was ready to come out of the oven. Again, another kind of fun and affordable thing to do in Matera, if you have an extra €3, is to visit the Museum of Bread. So, this is a little museum near the top of the Sassi, and inside here you can learn more about the history, ingredients, and traditions around the pane di Matera, and it's well signed in both English and Italian. If you're an active traveler, you're probably going to want to incorporate some hiking into your trip to Matera. At the very bottom of the Sassi district, you'll find the Gravina Canyon, which is a deep crevice in the stone that separates the historic and modern city center from the most ancient cave dwellings, which are on the opposite side of the Gravina River. If you've got good footwear and some hiking experience, you could really like adventuring into this part of the city. So to hike into the canyon, you'll need to find the trailhead. It's marked on Google Maps. From there, it's a really clear, easy to follow path from the street down into the canyon where you'll find a suspension bridge across the river. And then from there, you can go back up the hill on the opposite side to see these once inhabited caves and a panoramic viewpoint that looks back at the Sassi. The only thing you need to keep in mind here is that saying that what goes down must come up. Oh, I think it's the other way around, but you see what I'm saying. So there's no protection from the elements on this trail at all. So be careful about hiking in the heat of the day or if there's rain in the forecast, because these trails are very prone to flash flooding. The walk takes about 1 hour each way, and then you'll need to add more time for exploring. If you want the viewpoint without the hike, there are minibus tours that leave from the center of Matera, and then they go around the canyon to the viewpoint on the other side and give you like a little 30-minute photo stop. If you have a rental car, you can also just drive over. And now I want to loop back to something I mentioned before, which is the House Museum. So as I said, when we are talking about people living in the caves of Matera, we are not talking about the Middle Ages. People lived in these traditional Sassi cave houses in Matera well into the 1950s. It was only with the publication of this tell-all book calling the city the shame of Italy, followed by a visit from an appalled Italian prime minister, that these caves were abandoned in favor of newly constructed apartments and houses at the top of the canyon. Some of Matera's residents remained proud of the Sassi district and the unique lifestyle that had been the hallmark of their community for centuries. So when people were eventually allowed to return to the Sassi, they converted their former family homes into house museums. There are a few of these museums around the historic center, and through a combination of reconstructions, simulations, audio guides, and written information, you can kind of come to understand what life in the caves was like. I visited 2 cave house museums, and both were really similar, so I think that you'll be fine to visit whichever one you happen to notice as you walk by. Inside, expect to learn how large families live together in small spaces, often alongside animals like donkeys, pigs, and chickens. You'll learn how they stored and prepared food, how their sanitation systems worked, or didn't work, and how community played an important role in sustaining this unique way of life. The perfect follow-up to a house museum visit is a trip to one of Matera's underground spas. This was definitely one of the coolest and most unique things that I did in the city. I love visiting spas when I travel, and so on my second full day in Matera, I just had this thought. I wonder if there are any spas here. I looked on Google, and it turned out that there were at least 2 underground cave spas in Matera, and one did have availability for me later that afternoon. It was located inside the Locanda di San Martino Hotel, and it's called the Ancient Terme Romanae. It features a sauna, a steam room, and a dual-chamber swimming pool with a hidden whirlpool at the end. When I visited, there were only a handful of other guests there, so it was a very relaxing and tranquil environment. Admission to the spa at Locanda di San Martino was €30 for 90 minutes, and it included a bathrobe and mandatory swimming cap. If you go, you'll probably want to bring an extra towel to dry off, flip-flops, and then whatever kind of personal care products you need to feel presentable when you get out of the pool, because the change rooms here are small and very minimally equipped. The final activity that I want to highlight in Matera is the possibility to take a tuk-tuk tour. Matera can be a really challenging destination for anyone with mobility limitations because the most interesting parts of the city are built on these steep hills and accesses via long, uneven staircases, usually without handrails, slippery cobblestones, and kind of craggy sidewalks. So, A great alternative to exploring this region by foot is to take a guided tuk-tuk tour. You'll hop on board a typical Italian calesino, you'll take in the sights of the new city center up top, and then you'll descend into the ancient cave district. You can expect your driver to stop at some panoramic photo spots and to share some information about the different landmarks you see along the way. The best part, though, is that when you're done, you don't have to trek all the way back up to the top of the hill. Your tuk-tuk driver will whisk you right up. While you're in Matera, there are 2 more things you might want to consider doing. So number 1 is eating a meal in a cave restaurant. So you could go for dinner, you could go for lunch. There are fancy cave restaurants. There are more affordable cave restaurants. Whatever you're looking for, you should be able to find. But do reserve in advance, especially in high season, because the cave restaurants do book up quickly. You might want to try a few local dishes there. Some that I noticed, there's one called cialeda, which is kind of like a Matera version of panzanella. So it's a bread salad made with cubes of pane di Matera and then fresh local vegetables. As a vegetarian, I also really liked fave e chicory, which is kind of similar to hummus, but it's made from pureed or mashed fava beans, and then it's topped with cooked chicory. There's another great dish called crappietta. This is a really hearty stew, perfect if you're visiting in the cold weather, and it's going to be made from all different beans and grains, whatever's kind of in season here. And last, but definitely not least, you might want to consider the possibility of sleeping in one of Matera's cave hotels. Simply spending the night in Matera can become a once-in-a-lifetime activity. There aren't too many local people living in these caves today, but many of their former houses have been renovated and reopened as unique cave hotels. These are carved into the side of the hill, and they've got great modern amenities in these ancient cave surroundings. Over on my blog, I have a whole list of the nicest cave hotels that I noticed when I spent a few days in Matera. So I didn't personally stay in all of them, but I walked past, poked around, took a look inside, and would definitely consider any of them for my next trip. Have I sold you on visiting Matera? I hope so. The last thing that you're going to need to know before you plan a trip is how to get from Bari to Matera. So the train to Matera is operated by a private rail network. It's called Ferrovie Apullo Luciane, and they run trains between Bari and Matera daily from Monday to Saturday. Their train station is located adjacent to the Bari Centrale station. It's in a white building kind of beside the KFC, and you can purchase your train tickets there from machines in the station. The other way, when you're returning from Matera to Bari, you'll probably want to buy your tickets online in advance because the station there is not staffed. So the best way to do it is to purchase a ticket online and then to scan your ticket code, the QR code, to get access to the train station. The train to and from Bari and Matera often requires a quick change in a town called Altamura. I wouldn't worry too much about that. They will hold the trains for you, so if one train is running late, they'll hold the next one. But I do want you to keep in mind that that station was not very accessible when I visited, so if you have to change tracks, you're going to have to carry your own suitcases and luggage up and down the stairs in the station. Now, as I said, trains run from Monday to Saturday, but they don't run on Sundays. On Sundays, you have to take a bus to travel from Bari to Matera or vice versa. This is what I personally did, and it worked out really well for me. But the only thing is that the stops can be really hard to find, and in the high season, the bus can fill up. So again, over on my blog, I have a full guide to the best bus stop in Bari, the one that the bus goes to first, where you can get on and be guaranteed a seat. And then I also have some instructions on how to get back from Matera and where to catch the bus that way. So, I really hope that you do take the opportunity to go to Matera. It was an absolute highlight of the almost 2 months I spent in Puglia, and it's a destination I'm going to be recommending to all of my friends and family as they are planning Italy trips. Thank you so much for tuning in to the second episode of the Fearless Female Travels podcast, and I look forward to sharing more of my travels with you in 2025.